Reese's Peanut Butter Cups are the greatest, but let me play devil's advocate here. Let's see. So, no, that's a good thing. That's definitely not a problem. Reese's, you did it. You stumped this charming devil.
Welcome into the 49er Access podcast. My name is Sterling Bennett, and we have a ton to dive into today. Some news just broke, 30, 40 minutes ago. Niners signed about 5 players to the deals officially. They also lost some draft picks. There's Brandon Ayuk updates. There's Zach Wilson trade rumors. There's Tre'Davious White's free agency. Diving into all of that today on the pod. Hopefully you'll like, share, and subscribe. And let's dive into some housekeeping as of really, 1:30 this afternoon. The San Francisco 49ers have officially signed Leonard Floyd, Devondre Campbell, Chase Lucas, Isaac Yiadom, and Brandon Parker. 2 contracts. They also re-signed John Feliciano. Now, I'm sure that name Brandon Parker. Who the heck is Brandon Parker? No one's even talked about him. Who is a random person they've signed to a 1-year deal? Brandon Parker is a 6'8", 300-plus pound offensive tackle, former third-round pick of the Las Vegas, then Oakland Raiders when he was drafted. Spent 5 years with the Raiders. Again, he's a right tackle primarily and has made 33 career starts for the Silver and Black. When I saw the move, my initial thought was, okay, you have now the Matt Pryor, who was your backup tackle replacement. That makes the most sense to me. He also gives San Francisco some draft day flexibility. Now you have yourself a veteran backup tackle that has had starting experience, whereas let's say you get to pick 31 and the tackle you want or you have been wanting the entire draft process is not on the board any longer. Maybe you then pivot to a receiver or an edge rusher. It just gives them a tiny bit more flexibility on draft day. Diving into more about Brandon Parker. He's given up, he is a former, student, you might say, under now Niners offensive line coach, Coach Cameron Clemens. He was the assistant O-line coach with the Raiders when Parker was there. He has the same role in San Francisco, so there is some carryover from the Raiders' old regime now in to San Francisco. Other than that, there really wasn't too much big news as to signing new players today. Nothing much has broken as of 2:06 p.m. on the Pacific West Coast. But there was some large draft day news that will affect San Francisco this season. This was broken by Tom Pelissero of NFL Network. He said, the San Francisco 49ers will lose a 2025 fifth-round draft pick and will have their 2024 fourth-round draft pick 131, moved to the end of the 4th round because of payroll accounting errors. So no longer will they pick at 131. They're going to be pushed back all the way past the compensatory picks, making it essentially an early 5th-round pick now instead of a 4th-round pick for San Francisco. There also are some rumors, some rumblings that the Niners cap space this season could be affected by the accounting error, but that is a wait-and-see game as of right now. That could happen, may not happen, may happen. That is just one thing that could be affected by the accounting error. I'm sure Kyle Shanahan is wildly pissed off, though. When you think, well, I'm doing my job, right? I'm out here scouting players, bringing in coaches, this, that, and the other. I'm doing my job, and the accountants flubbed the payroll so bad to a point of instead of a late 4th-round pick, we essentially have an early 5th-round pick, which isn't that big of a deal, no. But when you lose a 5th-round pick next year, what comes to mind is George Kittle, Dre Greenlaw, even later picks, Tauno Funga, DJ Jones, all those guys were 4th or 5th and 6th rounders, and you now don't have that. Now, thankfully, just as of right now, Chase Young signed a 1-year, $13 million deal with the Saints. That is comp pick city for San Francisco. Now, you wish he had won against the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. You wish he had got the 100% effort from Young all season, but when you lose a comp pick or you lose one of your picks next year, you're now sitting back saying, man, now we have Chase Young's comp pick to make you not feel as bad. So you may lose some picks, but you also gain some, hence why you acquire these one-year rentals like Chase Young, like Randy Gregory, still a free agent. Like this is the trade-off, right? You go and get Chase Young, you pay a little bit of draft capital, and then you get a comp pick later in return for his services. But that is kind of the as of right now, as of the latest news surrounding San Francisco. So Leonard Floyd officially signed, Devondre Campbell, Chase Lucas, Isaac Yiadom, Brandon Parker, and John Feliciano now all under official contracts for San Francisco. And they did lose their 2025 fifth-round pick and had their 2024 fourth-round pick moved to the end of the fourth round. But let's dive into one of the, I don't want to say it's been this massive story, but Niner fans have been discussing what's going to happen with Brandon Ayuk. We followed it the entire offseason so far as to, are they going to trade him? Should they trade him? What can they get for him if they do decide to then trade him? And there were some reports last week that the Jaguars and Brandon Ayuk had mutual interest. And we talked about what does that mutual interest actually mean. And I didn't think there was much there. Didn't make a lot of sense to me. It's the offseason. There's always rumors flying around. Some you believe, some you don't, and some you kind of just stick to and go, okay, let's see what happens. And if people just waited a week or so, instead of saying, oh my goodness, Ayuk's out of town, it's over, he's gone, and looking towards the draft to replace him, they would have found out the story fizzled out. That is the exact verbiage via the reporter Mia O'Brien, who's the one who initially said there was mutual interest in between Ayuk and Jacksonville. She has now stated as of this morning that San Francisco initially or reportedly wanted pick number 17 and wide receiver Zay Jones. Then Jacksonville would have to pay Brandon Ayuk a massive contract. So again, I quote, fizzling out. That's exactly what I expect to happen on most Ayuk trade conversations. I'm sure, like anybody, San Francisco would say, hey, well, listen, doesn't mean you're going to like our offer or our counter offer to your initial offer. I'm sure Jacksonville said, hey, we'll give you a second-round pick, give you a third-round pick, and San Francisco said, no. How about pick number 17 to either get our tackle or replace Ayuk, and you give us Zay Jones? Now, I do think involved in that potential, reported, rumored, trade package San Francisco wanted in return for Ayuk, while it seems like Ayuk to Jacksonville is dead until further notice, which makes a lot of sense, I do think that the desire to have Zay Jones in a trade package should be something to keep your eye on, and not because of Zay Jones, but because San Francisco has been looking for a burner in the offense. They wanted Danny Gray, hasn't worked out. They want someone that can take the top off of defenses. That is Zay Jones, albeit a little older than a 22-year-old draft pick, right? So having Zay Jones in that conversation, if this was indeed true, is interesting. I think it does give us insight into where San Francisco is looking in the draft. They're not going to want this Juwan Jennings style of receiver. They're not going to want this hulking, like take Johnny Wilson, for example, with Florida State. He's like 6'6". He's huge. I like Johnny Wilson. I think he'd be great in the scheme. All that to say, it looks like San Francisco is maybe prioritizing, okay, how can we get a burner in this offense? Give us Debo, insert Ayuk, and a speed threat to open up the underneath, but also take the top off. Ayuk can do some of those things, but I also believe San Francisco wants that flexibility to have a player like Juwan in the slot, but also have this slot receiver that may be smaller, but can also take the top off the defenses, allowing Purdy to have this extra weapon to utilize. Like, as soon as you take the top off a defense, Kittle, Debo, Ayuk, their lives become 10 times easier. It's what Danny Gray was supposed to be. He's got 4.3 speed. It's going to be awesome. Well, unfortunately, he has not stuck on the depth chart. Can't stay healthy, and I wouldn't be surprised if he gets cut this year. He just hasn't been able to be on the field for a variety of reasons. He's been in Kyle Shanahan's doghouse for 2 years now, right? But I do think having Zay Jones, albeit, again, it's not about Zay Jones in particular, it's about finding that role in the offense. So if Mia O'Brien's reporting is true, and she believes San Francisco wanted pick number 17 and Zay Jones in return for Brandon Ayuk, while that trade's not going to happen as of right now, I do think if that trade package is to be believed, that wanting Zay Jones is a good indication as to where or what kind of receiver they're going to target in the draft. There's guys like Ricky Pearsall, Xavier Legette. If San Francisco, let's say their right tackle is not in the first round, the guy they want is either a second-round value or just, the tackle they wanted is already taken, do they pivot to an Xavier Worthy? I don't think Worthy will be there at 31, but it's just to say a player like that has blazing speed to make defenses have to scheme for another element in this offense. Because let's be honest here. You have McCaffrey, you have Kittle, you have Debo, you have Ayuk. You have the underneath taken care of. You have the deep crossers taken care of. You have the slants. Middle of the field is locked up as to what you can do. There's so much this team can do. You have arguably the most physical receiver in football in Debo Samuel. You have arguably the best separator in football in Brandon Ayuk. You have Kittle, who I think is probably one of the best over-the-middle threats at tight end in football. And you have McCaffrey in the backfield. What does this defense, or what does the offense still need? It's a burner. Once you get that final element to the offense, we've already seen it take off with McCaffrey and Purdy now as starters, but you give this offense a burning level, receiver that can take the top off and run right past cornerbacks and safeties. I mean, my goodness, what else can't this offense do? And it's already one of the best offenses in football. So again, it's not about Zay Jones, but keep an eye on San Francisco trying to fill that role come the draft or later in free agency. We do have another signing that happened, I believe, Saturday night, late Saturday night. San Francisco signed linebacker Ezekiel Turner to a 1-year deal. Now, this deal isn't official yet, but it is, going to happen in the next few days. Turner himself is a former undrafted free agent and has been with the Cardinals since 2018. He was a defensive back his entire career, but transitioned to linebacker last season. He's been a primarily special teams unit player. He actually blocked a punt, I believe, 2 years ago against San Francisco. But the reason why I bring up Turner's name here is because when you look at what San Francisco has done, and it kind of harkens back to 2022, that offseason, what do? Oren Burks, McLeod, George Odom was signed that offseason. They made it a point to improve the special teams. This offseason, very similar as to what they've done. They brought back Demetrius Flanagan-Falls. They brought back Chris Conley. They signed Chase Lucas. They extended George Odom. And now they've signed Ezekiel Turner. So it does feel like they're trying to round out that special teams group and unit to improve it. It was so bad. How many times did you watch a game and it's a pivotal moment, the kick goes off, Moody doesn't get the ball in the back of the end zone, which at times is designed to hopefully pin the opposing offenses deep in their own side of the field. And then you see when they try to enact that plan and put that plan in motion, 4 guys miss tackles, and now they're sitting there at their own 45-yard line. And you're like, Jesus. I think San Francisco wants to improve that room and hope to pin their the opposition deep in their own zones next year. All they need now is a returner. Once they get a returner, they're set. And whether it's Deontay Hardy, Cordero Patterson, or insert draft pick, wherever it might be, it does feel like San Francisco is kind of rounding out their special teams unit to make sure they're better this year, because it was bad against the Packers last year in the playoffs and other moments as well. You just cannot fall apart on 2 phases, right? Horrible run defense last year, really bad special teams. When you can improve special teams, fix your run defense, this goes back to this team being better this upcoming season than last year, and that's really hard to do when you went to the freaking Super Bowl. But I do think San Francisco is improving the margins, not star power, but improving the margins to make themselves better. Want to say hi to Josh Allen's in the Twitter chat saying trade for Zach. He means Zach Wilson. We'll get to Zach Wilson in 1 second. We also have Claudia saying hello, or Claudia, excuse me. What's going on, Claudia? Hope you're having a wonderful Monday afternoon. And let's talk about one more kind of rumor. Then we'll dive into Brock Purdy in a second, Zach Wilson, and Tre'Davious White. I promise we'll get there. Just hang on with me for one more second here. I do want to give you some NFL Combine, NFL Pro Day news, because the San Francisco 49ers were among teams that attended Canadian Football League cornerback Quantrez Stigger's Pro Day. It's a weird name, Quantrez Stiggers. Want to make sure I say that last name very clearly. In 16 games last year, Stiggers totaled 56 total tackles and 5 interceptions. He was also named the CFL's most outstanding rookie and was an all-star, their essential Pro Bowl for the CFL. So the reason why I bring that up is because I do think it does give us indications as to where San Francisco is looking. Right? They're looking for players that, whether it's the draft, and to add to Stiggers' resume here, or more insight into what and how they can acquire him, he has to be released by the CFL. He's currently under contract, but he plans to enter the NFL draft this year. If he is drafted, the CFL team he's with has said they will release him from his contract. So they're trying to find another cornerback, trying to find these, diamonds in the rough as they always do. But just to give you some insight here, they're looking at Canada for potential cornerbacks to add to their room. And okay, now let's dive into quarterbacks. And the reason why I bring up a name like Justin Fields, but not talking about Trey Lance or that 2021 class, forget about it. Justin Fields' trade to me, like many others, like Kenny Pickett's trade did to the Eagles, Justin Fields' trade from the Bears to Pittsburgh again proves and shows how special Brock Purdy's story is. And the reason why I bring it up is because if you saw my tweet about Brock Purdy after the Fields trade, you've already heard this, but 17 quarterbacks were drafted between 2021 and 2022. We're talking both drafts combined, not just first round, both drafts combined. 17 total quarterbacks. 15 of them are currently rostered. 13 of them are currently listed as backups on their current depth charts. 6 have been traded. Maybe a 7th trade on the way because of Zach Wilson. In just two of the 17 quarterbacks drafted in 2021 and 2022 combined are incumbent starters this year for their teams. Just 2. Trevor Lawrence and Brock Purdy. And to go even further here, only one of them has won a conference championship and appeared in a Super Bowl. The only one of the 17 quarterbacks drafted between 2021 and 2022 is pick 262, Mr. Irrelevant, Brock Purdy. The only one to go to a conference championship and win, and go to a Super Bowl. If that is not... It just blows my mind. Like, whenever I think about Brock Purdy, oh, he's good, he almost won the MVP, this, that, and the other, it's like, man, like, all that's true, but the story continues to grow. The more you see his compatriots get traded away, the more you see other quarterbacks in his draft class or even previous ones get moved and shipped out of town and traded for conditional 6th-round picks, it makes you appreciate Brock Purdy's success a lot more. Now, he'll likely get extended, he'll get a big payday, and we'll continue to talk about how important Brock Purdy is and how awesome his story is, but just as of 2 years into his career, and of the 17 guys, he tore his UCL. His career could have been over. Like, there are so many factors that go into Brock Purdy's story, but seeing Kenny Pickett, Sam Howell, and Fields get traded this offseason just continues to prove how much of a crapshoot the draft actually is when it comes to quarterbacks, but also just how incredible Brock Purdy's story really is. And the reason why I bring up Brock Purdy and Fields is because that brings us to Zach Wilson. Again, going back to Josh Allen on Twitter and X saying, trade for Zach Wilson. Trade for Zach Wilson. Would you trade for Zach Wilson? of the Jets. The Jets have been shopping him for almost the entirety of the offseason. They have openly said he stinks. They've openly said they don't want him. In fact, I think it was their GM, maybe it was their owner saying, hey, we have to get a real backup quarterback in this room behind Aaron Rodgers. They don't even view him as a backup quarterback. They view him as quarterback number 3. In fact, I think he's so bad, they want to get him off the roster completely. Still sick, I'm sorry. With all that said, the rumors are flying, circulating.
Reese's peanut butter cups are the greatest, but let me play devil's advocate here. Let's see. So, no, that's a good thing. That's definitely not a problem. Reese's, you did it. You stumped this charming devil.
What about Zach Wilson? Could he become a San Francisco 49er? Would the Niners trade a 6th or 7th round draft pick for Zach Wilson? Now, again, rumors are rumors, but according to Vincent Frank of Forbes and Sportsnaut, the rumors about Zach Wilson to the Niners are not false. He's hearing a 2024 7th round pick, so this year's 7th round pick, or a 2025 6th round pick could go in exchange for Zach Wilson. Now, the question is, would Kyle Shanahan want to coach Zach Wilson? There is 2 ways to look at this. One answer is yes. Kyle Shanahan had the Jets taken either Mac Jones or Fields or Trey Lance, Zach Wilson would have likely been the pick at number 3 in 2021 during the draft. They liked Zach Wilson a ton, enough to draft him number 3 overall. They liked him at BYU, liked his arm talent. They like Zach Wilson and what he can do as a football player. Now you fast forward 3 seasons, I honestly believe Kyle Shanahan would openly kill Zach Wilson after one practice. And the reason why I say that is because Zach Wilson threw 34 career games, okay? He has a total of 28 touchdowns. A total passing and rushing touchdowns, 28. He's thrown for 25 interceptions. He's fumbled the ball 17 times, and he's lost 12 of them. So he has totaled 28 touchdowns and 37 turnovers through 34 career games. Now it's the Jets. We're all aware of how bad the Jets have been the past couple years. Like, the Jets are going to jet, right? We all understand that. And this past year, you can debate that Wilson was not given a fair shake. Rodgers comes in, then he tears his Achilles, then Wilson comes in, and they're playing this musical chairs of, you're the quarterback, we believe in you, and they bench him, then he's quarterback 3, then he's inactive, then he's reactivated, then he's a starter again. You had the whole Mike White situation a couple years ago. Like, Zach Wilson has not been given a fair shake, per se, with the Jets. So there is some context that needs to be brought into the conversation here. So I dove into another former Jet quarterback that Kyle Shanahan has brought in to reshape his image, to make him look better amongst his peers, amongst other teams in the NFL. Sam Darnold. What did Sam Darnold's resume look like pre-Kyle Shanahan compared to Zach Wilson's? So, Sam Darnold, with the Jets, similar dysfunction, albeit I think Saleh and Douglas are a much better GM and head coach combination than what Darnold had previously. But Sam Darnold played 56 career games with the Jets and the Panthers, okay? He threw for 61 passing touchdowns and threw 55 interceptions. So eerily similar, albeit higher number totals, to Wilson's 28 touchdowns and 25 picks. Very similar. A lot of turnovers for both those players. But that's just passing touchdowns for Darnold, whereas Wilson's are total touchdowns. Then I went to, what did Sam Darnold do when it came to on the ground? He had 12 rushing touchdowns and 35 total fumbles, with losing 14 of those. Okay, so through 34 career games, Zach Wilson had 28 touchdowns and 37 total turnovers. Sam Darnold had 73 total touchdowns and 69 total turnovers. When you hear that, does that make you say, okay, well, that's not very far off. That's not, it's not too scary knowing what Sam Darnold was last year for us. In fact, Shanahan liked him and Brandon Allen so much, they felt okay trading away Trey Lance for now a pretty good deal at a 4th-round pick. Would you be okay trading for Zach Wilson? I'm fine signing Zach Wilson at a very cheap deal, but it's not as if trading for him would be that expensive. Let's say it is a rumored 7th-round pick this year or a 6th-rounder next year, which is the rumor as of now. You trade him for a day 3 pick where you're probably going to already draft the quarterback anyways. You get a guy Shanahan already liked in previous seasons, and he'd only count $1.055 million against your cap this year. You could argue, albeit a little more expensive than what would a Brock Purdy salary be if he drafted a quarterback this year. You're getting a quarterback Shanahan's already liked that has eerily similar stats to Sam Darnold, Jets and Panther tenure. Now, here's the thing, though, with Zach Wilson. Is that Zach Wilson, I have a hard time buying into him as a player. And I do think this team would also have a hard time buying into him. There are reports that he would be your quarterback number 2. And when I think about last year, having been at OTAs, having been at minicamp, being at training camp, watching this team live and in person, I can, without a doubt, say Sam Darnold did play better than Trey Lance. Watching everything unfold, okay, you trade Trey Lance away, whether you agree with it or not. If you were there, you watched Sam Darnold outplay Trey. Either way, Darnold was going to be quarterback number 2 on the roster. I have a hard time believing that you put Zach Wilson in this quarterback room. I would be a lot more confident if Brandon Allen or Sam Darnold were my quarterback 2 over Zach Wilson. Sam Darnold was the more refined passer out of college. There's a reason why the Vikings are paying him $10 million to be their bridge quarterback this year. Zach Wilson on the open market, after 1 year under Kyle Shanahan, is not getting a $10 million contract. His image is so far in the dumps that he will likely go for less than what Mac Jones went for, less than what Fields and Lance have already gone for. Zach Wilson right now, of the 5 quarterbacks drafted in 2021, has the worst resume, because Lance hasn't even played at all, but has the worst resume, arguably has one of the worst relationships with his current team. His current teammates wore his backup quarterback's shirt because they wanted him to play over Zach Wilson. There's talks of him being immature, and this, that, and the other. And I get it's New York, it's the bright lights, he's a BYU kid. You go from Utah to New York, it's a culture shock. Totally get it. He'd be a backup quarterback here. And it's not as if they're giving Brandon Allen a massive contract. Brandon Allen's contract this year is a $1.21 base salary, right? $1.21 million base salary, a $1.51 million cap hit, okay? He only has $400,000 fully guaranteed. This feels like a Nate Sudfeld situation where, okay, we have Trey, we have Jimmy, Sudfeld's quarterback 3, here comes Purdy, and I'm not saying Zach Wilson is Purdy, but when it comes to money and a younger player outplaying Brandon Allen, I think there would be room for that conversation. But I'll ask you, would you, let's say it's week 1 of the NFL season, you've gone through training camp, you've gone through OTAs, it's Zach Wilson's first year in this offense, albeit having already played with Mike LaFleur, who was with Kyle Shanahan, who left for the Jets when Saleh left as well. So there is some familiarity there. Would you be okay with starting a player? Let's say Purdy gets hurt for whatever reason. Would you be okay with starting a player that had not just passing touchdowns, 28 total touchdowns and 37 turnovers. I know I wouldn't. And I don't think Kyle would either. That isn't to say you wouldn't acquire him for a 7th-round draft pick, making your quarterback 3, and maybe at a certain time he's your quarterback 2 because someone else gets hurt or whatnot, and you reshape the image. They can also use Zach Wilson as to how they've utilized, take Chase Young, for example. Acquire him for a really cheap, late round 6th, 7th round pick. Let him, reshape his image, make him look better and more, suitable for other teams. Let him leave for let's say a $5-6 million contract next offseason. Guess what you get? You get a comp pick back. You're essentially getting a player for free. And in fact, because he's your quarterback 3 or 2, you're essentially gaining something from him even playing here or leaving eventually. So, there is a lot of pros to acquiring Zach Wilson. I believe you do not get a comp pick if he is released. So that is where that conversation of should you jump the gun and try to trade for him, right? He's a younger player. Maybe he just needs direction. Now, the stats are scary. For as bad as Sam Darnold's stats were, I was much, much more comfortable with Sam Darnold because he was a far refined passer, much more accurate. He had turnovers as well. We've already gone through them. I would like to think most Niner fans were a lot more comfortable with Sam Darnold being their quarterback 2 over a Zach Wilson. I'd like to think this year, knowing how comfortable Purdy has been with Brandon Allen, he is his confidant in that quarterback room. He's a 32-year-old vet under Burrow a couple years ago. Now in this system, it's a guy you lean on. Whereas Zach Wilson kind of feels like he'd be the quarterback that comes in and is wide-eyed. What do I do? Would he be someone to come in and put his head down and work his butt off? I don't know. Zach Wilson last year, because of the back and forth with the Jets, said, I'm not playing anymore. He essentially, well, I don't blame him, quit on the Jets. Now, the Jets quit on him, so he in return quit on the Jets. Okay, well, if he comes in as quarterback 3, becomes unhappy, this, that, and the other, he has to know his role here. Whereas the Jets, he was obviously the second best quarterback on that team last year. I don't know if he is the second best quarterback on this team if they acquire him over Brandon Allen. I think he'd be turnover prone, which he already has been. He's it's funny to look back at those pro days of Lance and Fields and Wilson and others amongst them that, wow, you're throwing against air. Zach Wilson is someone that doesn't like playing within the system. He's someone at BYU where they were go out there and play, Zach. Here's a play. We're going to run. But if things break down, go play hero ball. That's what he was doing with or at BYU. He tried to bring that into the NFL, which unless you're Mahomes or Josh Allen, it doesn't work out usually for you. And so for Zach Wilson, who was rookie, the arm talent is there. He has a great arm. It's not like the physical tools aren't there. He's mobile. He's young. The arm talent's there. He just doesn't have good decision making. Now, it all depends on how he comes into the system. Because if you're going to come in and you're going to think, I'm going to play hero ball, I'm going to be quarterback number 2 behind Brock Purdy. When I get my chance, I'm going to be the guy. Shanahan will put you in the doghouse, close your food slot, lock the key away, and you're never going to see the field again. That's not Shanahan's style. Now, Purdy plays within the system, but there are some things that Purdy does off schedule that make Shanahan happy, right? I can almost guarantee you with his backup quarterbacks, the reins sometimes tighten for his starter that are successful, whether it's Purdy or Jimmy G in previous years for a variety of reasons, right? If you don't think those reins are not going to be choking Zach Wilson out because they're so tight if he becomes a quarterback here, whether it's a backup or a quarterback 3, Shanahan is giving him no leash to run with. It is run the system, that's your job. Now, that worked for Sam Darnold. Now he's the Vikings starting quarterback as of right now. And probably this year, right? It's not to say Zach Wilson couldn't work in San Francisco. It's just to say, what he's done with the Jets wouldn't work in San Francisco. There'd have to be a play style change, right? You cannot play hero ball. Your tape in BYU, albeit at times is great, does not apply to San Francisco. Year 4 for you in the NFL. Like, they're not going to pick up your 5th-year option. You have nothing guaranteed. Like, if you're the quarterback 3, great. That's fine. Is Zach Wilson willing to keep his mouth shut, work hard, and is he okay with being quarterback 3? And if he's asked or thrust into being a starter for whatever reason it might be, would he revert back to his Jets BYU style of, I'm just going to figure this thing out and be off schedule the entire time, or is he going to hit Debo in stride? The arm talent's there. It's mental for Zach. It's mental. It always has been. Like, I liked Zach Wilson coming out. There was a lot to like of all the quarterbacks. Lance, Fields, Mac Jones. Like, there was a like to lock from all those quarterbacks. But the reality of it is, a lot of these guys, for a variety of reasons, like Fields in Chicago, amazing legs. Amazing legs. The arm talent was there. The accuracy was not. Right? The decision-making was not. He was not consistent with his arm. Zach Wilson, amazing arm talent. The decision-making and mental aspect of the game he could not grasp. Mac Jones, Patriots. Like, Mac Jones is the prototypical system quarterback. Right? They gave him no weapons to utilize. He goes to the playoff in year 1. Then mentally he breaks down because Belichick is going back and forth. He's arguing with coaches on the sideline. Like, it wasn't good for a lot of these quarterbacks. Can Zach Wilson under Kyle Shanahan, who is very tough on his players, thrive as a quarterback 3 or 2? I don't know. But if that's the rumor, would you want Zach Wilson? I'd be up for it, kind of. It's a cheap contract, quarterback 3, whatever. It doesn't bother me too much. Like, I also wonder if Kyle Shanahan likes him enough to bring him in, would they instantly extend him another year? Not a 5th-year option. Would they extend him for, 2025 and avoid the whole 5th-year option conversation and say, hey, you can be Brock Purdy's backup next year? I do wonder if that could be a possibility for him because he is so young. Don't take the 1-year route of quarterback 3, then go and get our comp pick. Take that quarterback or take that 2-year route and say, hey, we'll give you a 2-year deal this year and next year. Be Brock's backup after Brandon Allen leaves, once we have to pay Brock Purdy, and we'll see where this thing goes. I do wonder if that could be an option, but obviously Zach Wilson for a 7th-round pick isn't the worst thing in the world, albeit he would have to change mentally his mindset and how he plays. We have some questions here in the comments, and again, put your questions here. I will get to every single one of them. Excuse me again. Fluffy Ninja says, did we just pick up an O-lineman? We did. Fluffy, I already kind of talked about it earlier. His name is Brandon Parker. With the Raiders the last 5 years, former 3rd-round pick. He's like 6'8", 320 pounds, whatever he might be. He's a backup right tackle. This team currently does not have a backup tackle. Now, again, if they draft one, then Parker is going to be fighting with Jalen Moore and Colton McKivitz to be that player. This just feels like a Matt Pryor replacement in case the right tackle San Francisco wants is not there. Now, there is this super negative way of looking at this, is that, oh, they're bringing in a backup right tackle. That means they're not going to draft one this year, which would be horrifying to think of, but is certainly an option because it is Kyle Shanahan. And if you hear Matt Maiocco and you hear Jennifer Lee Chan discuss what they think's going to happen, they use that word comfortable a lot when referring to the offensive line. That's horrifying to think of, but Fluffy, as you know, I'm not moving off of that right tackle projection in the 1st round, but obviously we will see. But Brandon Parker, backup right tackle, just to give this team some depth. Maybe he fights with Jalen Moore as that tackle. Maybe McKivitz goes to your swing tackle. And like Matt Pryor last year, you have Brandon Parker kind of being that inactive on game days unless someone gets hurt tackle on your bench. Samuel, in the chat, what do you think Brock Purdy needs to improve on? Well, it's hard because how do you improve upon your physical traits, right? Like, can you get faster? Sure. He can't get taller. Like, Purdy is someone who has been relatively healthy. I would honestly strengthen my neck if I was him. A lot of stingers last year, some head injuries, albeit that wasn't because he was putting himself in harm's way. I do think for him, this is going to be how do you process, and he's already great at it, but like now you've seen a full season of defenses. They've got tape on you. How do you react? You were uber successful. You almost won the MVP. But now you just saw the juggernaut in your way, Mahomes and a Spagnuolo defense. I would love to see Brock Purdy become...
Hey, it's Kaylee Cuoco for Priceline. Ready to go to your happy place for a happy price? Well, why didn't you say so? Just download the Priceline app right now and save up to 60% on hotels. So whether it's Cousin Kevin's Kazoo Concert in Kansas City, go Kevin, or Becky's Bachelorette Bash in Bermuda, you never have to miss a trip ever again. So download the Priceline app today. Your savings are waiting.
Go to your happy place for a happy price. Go to your happy price, Priceline.
More of a leader in regards to how Peyton Manning was, and that's a big ask for a young quarterback still, but Purdy from day one was very assertive in who he was, very comfortable in being a leader on this team. He was telling Trent Williams, hey, shut the F up during huddles. And it was like, oh, like this kid's serious. And he's quarterback 3 or 2 during practice. So I think for him, it's, not being afraid to recognize who the mic is or the coverage is and make adjustments of the play. I know that's up to Kyle Shanahan sometimes as to they'll call 2 plays in the huddle. Purdy picks one. But I would like to see him assert himself more at the line of scrimmage with the offensive line. But it's tough in this offense too because the center will also call out coverages. Juszczyk will help do the same thing. So I think for Brock, when it comes to pre-play, pre-snap, that's what I want to see him improve upon because I do think there are times he can put his teammates in better positions now that he has seen all these coverages, how defenses are going to scheme for him now in 2 years with San Francisco. And I also want to see him just work on his arm strength. It improved last year off the UCL, and you want to talk about getting better. If San Francisco wants that deep threat, he's already willing to do so. He was already efficient doing so last year. But if San Francisco wants that deep threat, got to get stronger legs, got to get a stronger arm. That's just how it is. Now, that's tough to do so. Like when you're 25, 26, it's really hard. Like you feel like you're in the peak of your career and you're not playing baseball. It's not, how do I add velocity to my ball? That's not what you're asking. You're asking, how do I add arm strength? How can I get, 5, 6 extra yards? I do think for Brock Purdy, that is what you want to do this offseason with the full offseason to work with now. But other than that, not to say Brock is perfect, there's always going to be the processing side of things that we're never going to see. Or if you do see it, it's like, wow, that was great by Brock. So I do think that. Arm strength, strengthening your neck to avoid head injuries, to avoid neck injuries. I also think that for Brock, just asserting yourself more. Like, take on that franchise quarterback role that's already been placed on you. Go be a Peyton Manning. Go be a Drew Brees. Go be the guy calling out coverages, changing plays pre-snap, and just being, in a way, the head coach on the field for the offense. Kyle's great. Kyle is very fickle with that stuff, but I do want to see Purdy do that as well. Fluffy also says, and I already mentioned it earlier as well, Chase Young to the Saints, a comp pick, should be headed San Francisco's way because of that. But let's get out of the quarterback conversation for a second because we talked about Purdy, talked about Zach Wilson, and let's dive into arguably the biggest conversation happening as of right now for San Francisco. All weekend it was Tre'Davious White. I am someone that mentioned him as a target pre-free agency as kind of like, hey, he's a guy who was injured, could be cheap. But now it feels like that the interest in him might be heating up. There was a report this weekend that he has visits lined up with the Rams and the Raiders, and there were a few more teams showing interest in him as well. All that per NFL Network's Mike Garafolo. But then Vincent Frank, again, who had the Zach Wilson rumor, also mentioned this, that the Niners are among the few other teams showing interest in Tre'Davious White. So, okay. Tre'Davious White is very intriguing because at his peak, when he was young, wasn't injured, he was arguably the best cornerback in football, at least in the AFC. It was like him and Stephon Gilmore, like those were the guys, right? Now, post-injury, it's a little different, right? He's lost a step. He's probably a liability in man coverage, let's be honest here. But if you think about what San Francisco has done the past couple seasons with their cornerback room, they come in with a lot of young guys, right? Excuse me, I'm sorry. They come in with Ambry Thomas, Lenoir, Womack, Luter. Then they have their bona fide number one in Mooney Ward. In previous years, it was you have Jason Verrett as your number one, Emmanuel Mosley. You have young guys like Lenoir and Thomas and Womack. They always want to have that one vet. The past couple of years, it's been trying to rehab and reintegrate Verrett into the defense and hope he's healthy. It hasn't worked out. 2018, which is the prime example of this, is you bring in Sherman off the Achilles tear, and in 1 year's time, he's helped improve the secondary. He's a great leader for your defense, and now you're playing in the Super Bowl with Sherman back to his elite level form, at least for 1 year. That is kind of, I don't want to say the blueprint as to what San Francisco likes to do, but they're very unafraid to bring in cornerbacks that have former injuries, that have a boomer bust potential on cheap years, that have incentive-laden deals. Now, for Tre'Davious White, I have a hard time believing he will sign for less than $4-6 million, but the need is there. I get you just sign Isaac Yiadom. You have Mooney Ward. You have Lenoir. You have Yiadom, who by last year's account was one of the best press coverage corners in football, but you also want to insulate your room. So then you're going to have on your bench, as of right now, you're going to have Ambry Thomas, Darrell Luter Jr., Chase Lucas, Samuel Womack, and insert other guys they bring in. Like, what is wrong with taking a flyer on Tre'Davious White? Now, $4 million seems like a lot. You don't have to guarantee that money. Maybe he wants a guarantee to make sure, hey, I'm still getting paid. But he also got cut by the Buffalo. So he already is getting paid a chunk of change this year by a former team. So maybe he comes in and says, hey, I'll take a 1-year deal. I'll play in a zone coverage system that fits my now physical ability. Like, again, in man coverage, don't you dare. But in zone coverage, just like Richard Sherman, off an Achilles tear, you bring him in. He's not going to be a liability. You can almost protect him physically from not just getting burnt in man coverage, but also you can protect him needing to rely on his physical body, the physical attributes he once had to keep up with the elite level receivers in the NFC West. So, like, I would hate to see Tre'Davious White in man coverage against, DK Metcalf, right? I'm sure eventually it'll be Marvin Harrison or Malik Neighbors, right? I would hate to see him against Cooper Kupp or Puka Nacua. But I would not mind seeing him in zone coverage against those guys because he'd be more apt to succeed against them in San Francisco's zone coverage scheme. Now they were going back to who they were the past couple years pre-Steve Wilkes. I also think for Tre'Davious White that one kind of tidbit is that he and Mooney Ward, who is already in San Francisco, share an agent. Not just an agency. They have the exact same agent. So, okay, I thought, well, how can you kill two birds with one stone? If I'm San Francisco, I'm walking into, Mooney Ward's agent's office and I'm saying, hey, or I'm calling him and I'm saying, hey, we want to extend Charvarius Ward. What's your offer, counter offer? And if they act in good faith, which San Francisco has shown to do, we're already talking about Richard Sherman. When Sherman got hurt in 2019, and was out for a game or so, whatever it was, they made sure, even though he didn't meet his incentives, they paid him in good faith because he was so good for the team. Like, they made sure to reward Sherman for what he had done for that roster and that defense. The same thing would go for a negotiation with White and Mooney Ward. So you call Mooney Ward's agent up, hey, and you negotiate a contract extension with him, lowering his cap hit this year, then say, hey, what about your guy Tre'Davious White? Oh yeah, okay, like, and then those conversations start to spur. What would you pay? How would you like? And let's be honest here, relationships are everything. If you act in good faith with someone else's client, they're more apt to have their other client open to signing with you as well. Like, it doesn't happen all the time. Relationships are key, and Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch and Niners front office are great at building relationships with their players. I think if they approached Ward with a contract extension, I think it would go a long way and open up that conversation with Tre'Davious White of, hey, we'll give you a 1-year deal, play across Mooney Ward. We have this new zone coverage scheme we're going back to. We can protect you. You have depth pieces in Yadam and Ambry Thomas that can come in if White's legs are a little tired, if the injuries creep back up. You'd have some depth to protect you if White goes down. And look, you go on X, you go on Twitter, go on Instagram today. What will you see? Go on Mooney Ward again, the same agent as White. Go on his Twitter. What will you see? He's pandering to Niner fans asking, we share an agent, should I talk to them? He's like, hey, we can get something done here. Like, I like Tre'Davious White. They played in the AFC together for a long time. Had plenty of battles when it was Bills and Chiefs. Like, there's respect there mutually between those two. And there's a connection that Mooney Ward can say, hey, Tre'Davious, we have the same agent. Bring your you-know-what to SF. Let's go win a championship. Like, that will intrigue Tre'Davious White a lot. And then you have John Feliciano, who played with White from 2019 to 2021, post on his IG, Trey White's the GOAT. There's obviously guys in the building who do like Tre'Davious White. They played with him or against him. There's mutual respect, and they see the value of getting him in that room. Like, Mooney Ward is great, right? I do think adding someone, boomer bust contract, a la Richard Sherman, 2018, off the ACL and the Achilles tear, he's supposed to be ready by training camp. If that's the case, get him in there. You have depth to protect him if he needs an off day, needs a vet day, and if he's healthy, like, you can get yourself a 2020 Jason Verrett on a 1-year deal where he's an all-pro. Like, that's obviously best case scenario, but San Francisco's excuse me, already been trying to do that the past handful of seasons. Tre'Davious White's like 28 years old. He's young. He's not a 31-year-old Verrett who unfortunately just broke down. Like, he has torn ACL and torn Achilles. Those are tough. It takes guys some time. But a 1-year deal, you can be a vet. Like, you're already trying to, like, they gave Jason Verrett reps against the Ravens on Christmas this past year to hopefully take Ambry Thomas's spot on the depth chart, to be their cornerback number 2 opposite Mooney Ward. I'd much rather have Tre'Davious White for a, $4-6 million deal with incentives to then become double digits. Like, that makes a lot more sense than trying to bring in Isaiah Olivers and Jason Verretts and insert like Dante Johnson again. Like, this team is obviously looking for depth. They're really young at they are really young at cornerback. Luter, Womack, Thomas, and Lenore are 4 very young cornerbacks. They're probably going to draft one this year. They have Chase Lucas now. They have Isaac Gator. Like, they have so much depth. Why not take a flyer on Tre'Davious White who, forget Zach Wilson, you bring in White for a couple $1 million. Like, save your money, my friend. Like, I think bringing in White makes a lot of sense. Now, again, what would that deal look like? Again, 1 year, $4 or $5 million base with like the incentives to get him towards $10 to $12 million. You add in the incentives, you have bonuses in there, and you also add the injury clause. Like, there's a way San Francisco and White can protect themselves in case he gets hurt again. And I hate to play this card because it's kind of foolish, but you remember when San Francisco traded for Christian McCaffrey? They wanted him, mind you. You know who else wanted him? The Rams. Who are the two known teams that want Tre'Davious White, or at least having visits scheduled with him? The Raiders and the Rams. Now, I'm not saying do it because the Rams are doing it. I'm saying do it because he'll make your team better, but it never hurts to stick it to the Rams once again. Like, why not? Like, he's already going to be on the West Coast in LA, in Las Vegas. Like, why would you not say, come to Santa Clara for a day? And if the reports are true by Vincent Frank, that they're one of the teams involved, if they like what they see, do not let him leave. And at that point, if you're already talking to Ward about an extension, get both done the same day. Act in good faith and figure this thing out. Now, again, there is no promise he's healthy. There's no promise that he's going to be, Tre'Davious White, former Pro Bowler. That's not the case. But there's an opportunity to acquire a player that's a veteran, that has been a lockdown cornerback number one in his career for relatively cheap. You bring those guys in, they're going to impact your room by being a veteran presence already, being a leader, right? But if they're healthy, then and they can find their form again, you're getting a really good player. Even if he isn't CB1, let's say he is a CB2 that's lost a few steps. Okay, that's why you have Ambry Thomas. That's why you have Isaac Yiadom. That's why you like Darrell Luter Jr. That's why you draft a guy as well. Why not have the most bang for your buck? And I'm sorry, I like Isaac Yiadom. If he's your CB2, fine. But I'd much rather have the option of Tre'Davious White in his own coverage scheme that just gives me all the feelings of Richard Sherman 2018, 2019, and you're no longer going to have to rely on an undrafted Emmanuel Mosley and K'Wan Williams. You're going to have Mooney Ward and Lenore. And to go even further on this, I already mentioned it earlier, talking about White in previous podcasts. Mooney Ward was not following Rashee Rice on the Kansas City Chiefs. He was not following their number one guy. You would have someone that, yes, wouldn't need to shadow the number one receiver of the opposing team, but I'll ask you this. If Mooney Ward's not going to follow that one player, that star number one receiver the opposing team has, would you rather it be DK Metcalf, Rashee Rice, Stephon Diggs, Tyreek Hill, insert other star player, Jamar Chase, star receiver, lined up across Ambry Thomas or Tre'Davious White? Like, if Ambry Thomas is your fifth cornerback, that's a deep cornerback room. A very deep cornerback room. Like, I would love if that was the case. Yeah, it's a name value over production, sure. We're not very pro that. But what Tre'Davious White brings is what most other cornerbacks on the open market would not at this point. Like, he brings more to the table than Ambry Thomas, than Luter Jr. And I think even bringing in White to, in a way, coach up Luter Jr. would be awesome. Because San Francisco loves Luter Jr. He didn't have the offseason last year. You bring in White to help Luter Jr. to coach him up. I mean, not that he's waiting in the wings, but I think if they do not sign Tre'Davious White, I think they would rather go into this year, or they would go into this year with Luter Jr. in a competition with Yiadom and Thomas for cornerback number 2. I think they like him that much. And so we'll see. I also feel like they're waiting on the safety market to come down. There is no Justin Simmons update as of right now, unless it's already on Twitter. I have no idea. I haven't checked in an hour. But as of right now, the safety market has paused. Julian Blackmon's visiting, I think it's the Raiders. Maybe it's the Rams. I'm not entirely certain. But he's visiting some team. No, it's Buffalo. Julian Blackmon visiting Buffalo. So once Blackmon's off the board, if he does indeed sign, and Cam Curl's already gone, then I think we see Justin Simmons' deal kind of pop up and say, oh, there's Simmons. But I would not be surprised if SF is kind of weighing White and Simmons. Or tight end too. I'm a Robert Tonyan guy. There's so much San Francisco can do. And even on post week 1 of free agency, it's really, really exciting to see all the opportunities they have to improve this roster and team still. But look, that's all I got for you. There wasn't much to dive into today, but Sunday had a lot of rumors. Zach Wilson, would you trade a 7th round pick or a 6th round pick for Zach Wilson? Would you want him to be your quarterback number 2? Would you go sign Tre'Davious White to be this team's cornerback number 2? I would lean heavily one of those way. It's definitely the latter of the two. But San Francisco seemingly has their cap stuff figured out. Leonard Floyd's official, amongst many other signings of today. They signed Brandon Parker, and it feels like San Francisco is 1 or 2 more moves away pre-NFL draft that could really set themselves up to be the team again in the NFC, and they're already Super Bowl favorites again. Like, they're already the betting favorite to go back and win it all. Like, I know fans are, oh, they didn't do this and they didn't do that. Like no. Like, San Francisco's put themselves in a position to be in that conversation. And if they add a Tre'Davious White, a high upside guy that has a certain low floor, or you add a Justin Simmons, like, you can beef up the roster. And like the old Wendy's commercial, they got the beef. Like, you got to have the beef. Like, you add some beef, you are going to make your team better. Right now, San Francisco's got some beef. Let's get some more beef in the building. I'm all for getting some more beef in the building. All that said, thank you guys for liking, sharing, subscribing. Hope you guys liked the show. I really enjoyed doing this with you all. Hope you're having a wonderful Monday afternoon. I have to go to work, so I have to leave. But all that being said, don't forget to follow us on social media at 49ers_access is the X or Twitter, and 49ers.access is the Instagram. You can also use our promo code 49ersaccess, 49 ERSACCESS at SeatGeek.com and save yourself $20 off your first purchase. My name is Sterling Bennett, and until next time, stay faithful.